Hello, Flat Earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. I invite you to don your tinfoil hat and join me in a conspiracy theory fueled foray into map projections and a look at air currents around the Earth or across the flat Earth, and how we can be deceived into perceiving or believing that we live on a globe because of these various projections. We're also going to have a look at a claim by an anti-flat earth pilot who's a prolific poster of videos, and he's recently made some claims that the Eotvos Effect is somehow caused by us being on a spinning globe Earth. And this, according to him, is some kind of debunk of the flat Earth. So we'll have a look at that. But first, I want to look at these map projections. And what we can see on here is air currents being represented on this particular projection. And this is on the website earth.nullschool.net. It's a really good resource for looking at these kinds of things, and it gives you these up-to-date projections. At the moment we're looking at an equirectangular projection. You can choose a type of projection down here, and you can choose what to look at. You can look at air currents, for example, or we can look at ocean currents and see what they're doing there. We can also look at chemicals. We've got carbon monoxide, surface concentration, carbon dioxide here. Let's just wait for that to come up. All right, and what's this one? We've got sulfur dioxide surface mass. So a very good tool here. We can also look at particulates. We've got dust extinction, aerosol optical thickness, and various other ones, particulate matter, and particular. Let's have a look at this one. All right, so very interesting to see what's going on across the Earth here with these different projections. But what we're going to focus on in this one is the air, and we'll just have a look at these different projections. And I'd like to point something out that's missing from this list of projections that we can choose from. The first one is this Atlantis projection. Let me just close that so we can see it, which is quite spectacular. Got Australia over here on the left, and the Americas here, Africa and Europe up here, and Antarctica down here. And the cool thing about this is you can move this about and have it displaying in different ways for you. So excellent way of visualizing this, depending on how you want to look at it. And let's just have a look at some of the other versions. We've got the conic equidistant here, which is very cool as well. Yeah, and another one we have this is the equirectangular that we were looking at just now. Obviously very familiar similar to the Mercator projection, where we've got a very large Greenland, oversized Greenland, and so lots of distortion north and south there. We've also got the very familiar orthographic view showing us a globe, and what we will look at a little bit later on in this video is how these projections can be made into a globe to give us this apparent three-dimensional representation on a 2D surface, and obviously have us believe that this is our reality. This is what we're told is our reality, and we'll have a look at how that doesn't have to be that way. We've also got this Patterson projection, very similar again to the Mercator. And we have this stereographic projection, which is very cool. You can zoom out quite a long way here, and see how these air currents come in and how they circulate. All right, so very spectacular. We have this Waterman butterfly, the kind of origami version of the Earth here, which can be folded up obviously ending up as a globe again, and the Winkel tripel or tripel. I'm not sure exactly how to say that, but again, we can see here how these longitude and latitude lines get distorted depending on the center point of the projection. So this is an important thing to bear in mind when we're looking at these projections, because obviously they're all based on a predetermined point of reference, or two predetermined points of reference, the two poles basically, the north and the south poles. So everything from those 2 points is then created with this distortion of the longitude and latitude and equatorial lines here. So you know, just playing around with this is a good way to see how the geometry and trigonometry, or the angles and everything that have been used to create these projections, can be manipulated into any shape we like. But again, what we have is this predetermined focal point of the South Pole down here, of course, and the North Pole here. Now, the reason I'm really pointing this out is that there is something missing from this, and that is the azimuthal equidistant projection from the North Pole. We've been through all the projections here. Now what's interesting about this is that this website used to feature an azimuthal equidistant projection from the North Pole, and as flat Earth gained popularity since let's say around 2015, obviously it was gaining popularity way before then, but it seemed to reach a bit of a greater point of expansion around 2015, 2016. And what's curious is that if we go to look at the old version of this in the Wayback Machine, we can see here that in 2016 we still had this choice of an azimuthal equidistant projection, along with all the other projections we looked at just now. But currently that is now missing. You know, it is very curious and suspicious that the azimuthal projection did once exist on this very cool educational tool back in 2016. The website's only been around since a couple of years before then, but when we jump to current day, 2019, it's no longer there. So I think the azimuthal projection went missing in about 2017. We can see here that this is in October 2016, and the azimuthal equidistant projection still existed. And this is really quite an enthralling projection, and seems to make a lot of sense, really, the way that everything flows around here. We've got very little happening in the north and a lot going on around the equator and further south. But obviously very, very curious that this particular projection, one that's obviously very popular with researching flat Earth, has now gone missing from this educational tool. So let's have a look at some claims made by someone who firmly believes that we live on a globe. We're going to have a look at this video by Wolfie6020, who claims to be a pilot, and he is a prolific poster of globe defending videos. Very much dislikes the flat Earth or any idea that deviates from the belief that we live on a globe. And in this particular video, he's claiming to verify Earth's rotation with the Eotvos Effect, and also claims that this isn't the kind of experiment that flat earthers are afraid to try. So this does relate to the map projections that we saw just now, as well as the air currents that we were looking at. Now, in general, Wolfie likes to claim that he knows we live on a globe because that's the way he navigates across the Earth when making flight plans to plot a course from one place to another. But really, this is just a case of using the Haversine formula, which is related to spherical geometry. And Wolfe will often claim that flat earthers can't make flight plans like he can make flight plans with any degree of accuracy for a flat earth compared to a globe. But this really is a non-starter, because again, he's using the Haversine formula to make his flight plans, because he has to use spherical geometry based on the longitude and latitude lines which are created from these two different poles, the North and the South Pole, that we are given as our starting points, as well as the date line, of course, to give us this global projection. So really, if you're going to make a flight plan for a flat Earth, then you can't use longitude and latitude lines and polar coordinates that are used to give us a globe projection. You'd have to come up with a different set of coordinates with different start and end points, or different poles, or maybe no poles at all, because really it's just a case of projection. So what we had here with this projection just now, the Azimuth Equidistant projection, is a projection centered on the North Pole. So you can do quite a lot with this kind of projection. You can tell the time, and it works as far as projections, any other projection goes. But of course, what we are given with the globe is two poles, a North Pole and a South Pole. So when we're given this globe version of the Earth, let's just go to that now. All we have really is these longitude and latitude lines that obviously are centered here on the North Pole, and another set that are divided by the equator that are projected from the South Pole. So this is just basically choosing 2 points on the Earth from which to have two azimuth equidistant projections, and then they are put together to give us this globe. Yeah, so that's really all that is. But of course, if this is a worldwide accepted coordinate system, then all navigation is based upon that, and you're going to have to use spherical geometry, and so you would use the Haversine formula to go from one place to another based on these coordinates here, which obviously do get narrower as you get towards the point that it's projected from, and expand as you get towards the equator. So it really is a choice that we are forced into using, that is based on giving us this globe projection. It doesn't dictate the actual physical shape and form or any alleged movement of the Earth. It's just one that works because 2 points were decided upon in which to have these two different projections and put them together to form a world map, as it were. So that's really all that is when it comes to that kind of claim, to know that we're on a globe just because a certain mathematical formula or spherical formula or spherical geometry formula is used. And it's really just the difference between Euclidean and non-Euclidean geometry. We won't get into that too much now, because what we're really looking at is the claims made in this particular video. And again, the claim is that he's verifying the Earth's rotation with the Eotvos effect and an experiment, and he's claiming that this is the kind of experiment that flat earthers are afraid to try. So what you can see here on the screen is a video that was made by someone else, and Wolfie's posted it on his own channel because it's a video of an experiment that Wolfie did, in which he took a 500-gram weight and weighed it on the scales that you can see here, from a flight going east to west across Australia, or kind of northwest, and then did the same going west to east. And what we have here is the weight weighing more when flying east to west than when flying west to east. And the claim made by Wolfe here, I'll just bring up the claims that he's made in this video here, is that it is the effect that is solely due to being on a rotating spherical Earth. And we're going to see why that is just a single-minded interpretation and really isn't one that is necessarily agreed upon by the aviation industry or when it comes to natural phenomenon on or above the Earth. But let's just go through these claims that Wolfe makes in this video. And the first one he says is that flat earthers claim there are no experiments to prove the Earth's rotation, and then of course says that this particular experiment where we see a difference in the weight going west to east and then east to west and then west to east is some kind of proof that proves the Earth's rotation. And again, this claim is made that the Eotvos effect is solely due to being on a rotating spherical Earth. And this claim that flat earthers are afraid to try certain experiments, such as an experiment like this. Now, there is no denying that you would get these results going east to west and then west to east. And the claim made by Wolfe here is that when aircraft fly east at 500 miles per hour, it is flying faster than flying west, resulting in centrifugal force that should be measurable. Thus, objects should appear lighter when flying east than when flying west, and that the results show what we would expect on a rotating Earth. Now again, no denying that these are the kind of results you would get, and there's no denying that you would actually end up flying faster going west to east than you would going east to west, and this would in fact give you a difference in the weight, because if you're flying faster, then you're going closer to the speed that of the downward acceleration of the weight. So yes, that would weigh the weight would be less if you were flying faster while carrying that weight. You're kind of compensating against this downward force of the weight by going faster. But is that really due to us flying above a spherical Earth? Well, not really. This is just a claim or an interpretation that is made from these results. Because when we look at what would directly influence this difference in speed going west to east, we can see that there is a jet stream going across Australia from west to east. So this would increase the speed of the aircraft, and therefore we would see a difference in the weight, because if you're going faster in a lateral or horizontal direction, then the downward force of the weight would not be so much as if you're just standing still. Now, of course, it is very well understood that the explanations we are usually given for the cause of jet streams and winds going in different directions either side of the equator is because we are on a spinning globe. These are just explanations that go with the model or the idea, but what we're looking at here is the direct cause of the increase in speed, and this is down to the jet stream. It is not because of a difference in the centrifugal force going around an alleged globe east to west or west to east. It is simply because we have this very real, very easily measurable phenomenon of a jet stream going west to east, creating a greater speed going west to east. It doesn't have to be, and it is not only down to this single-minded explanation of being on a globe. Yeah, so here is what someone like Wolfe as a pilot will know creates a greater speed across the Earth in a certain direction, because pilots do have to know about wind speeds, and they have to know about the jet streams, and this is something that they even take into consideration whenever they make a flight plan. And we can see here, for example, on this website here, Private Fly, where it tells us how does the jet stream affect my flight time. Flights between London and New York or other transatlantic routes can vary considerably in their flight time. Typically, an eastbound flight from the US to Europe is faster than flying in the other direction due to the push factor of a jet stream. It is not uncommon for pilots of both airline and private jet flights to save lots of time against schedule on an eastbound Atlantic flight, particularly in the winter and early spring. Okay, goes on to explain what a jet stream is. Jet streams are strong westerly winds that blow in a narrow band in the Earth's upper atmosphere at the altitudes used by most aircraft. Where these packets of fast-moving air form a tube, they are called jet streams. By flying in a jet stream, aircraft travelling from west to east, the same direction that Wolfie was going when he got a lighter weight on the scales, get carried along by the tailwind, saving them time and or fuel. In fact, most airline pilots are trained to reduce airspeed when the winds are so much to their advantage to save fuel costs, not to fly in the shortest possible time. Private jet pilots nearly always fly as fast as possible, but would of course speak to the customers on board to ensure that an early arrival time is acceptable. And it goes on to explain a bit more about the conditions that create the jet stream. The North Atlantic jet stream typically reaches its peak intensity during January and February, when the temperature contrast between the equator and the North Pole is largest. The intensity of the jet stream also has a big impact on weather, generating polar vortex-related winter conditions. Airspeed and ground speed are not the same thing though. An aircraft can be flying within normal design limits well below the speed of sound at altitude, but according to its ground speed appear to be flying at near supersonic speeds. So yeah, because the air is basically pushing it along. But again, no mention of this having anything to do with going with or against any alleged rotation of the Earth. It is simply down to the weather. And again, it is well understood that a common explanation for the weather or the difference in the rotation of winds either side of the equator is said to be due to the Earth spinning. We're going to have a look at how ridiculous that is in a second. But let's just have a look at a couple of other reports here that kind of reaffirm the direct influence of the speed of an aircraft being because of the jet stream and what actually causes the jet stream. So we have here, how do the jet streams affect flights? Jet streams are strong westerly winds that blow in a narrow band in Earth's upper atmosphere at the same altitude at which airplanes fly. They form because of temperature variations between the poles and the equator, and they exist in both hemispheres, although those in the northern hemisphere are stronger. Airplanes flying eastward in a jet stream get a powerful boost, but those flying westwards must fight an equally powerful headwind. Okay, so we have these variations as well. And now, again, we are told that the Earth is rotating at a constant rate. But what we have here is this obvious difference throughout the year and the seasons and the temperatures that creates the difference in the speeds of the jet streams. So there's nothing consistent about the speed of a jet stream. If it's said to be caused by the Earth rotating, and the Earth is said to be rotating at a consistent rate, then we should also have a very consistent jet stream. But no, it's all down to temperature and air pressure, not anything really to do with anything that can be physically measured or determined as being due to the rotation of the Earth. And we can see here that, for example, there's a record-breaking speed from an airliner, 800 miles per hour, due to this jet stream. And it says here that airplanes often receive a speed increase from air currents high in the skies, but very few get an insane boost like this, helped by a tailwind of more than 322 kilometers or 200 miles per hour. A Boeing 787 jet reached a ground speed of 1,289 kilometers an hour on Monday night. The top speed was recorded by Virgin Atlantic commercial flight from LA to London while over central Pennsylvania. That's somewhere around 10,670 meters or 35,000 feet above the ground. Never ever seen this kind of tailwind in my life as a commercial pilot, tweeted Peter James, a commercial pilot. Now, again, what we get is this cause of the jet streams being put down to the differences in temperature between different air masses. The main jet streams move from west to east, benefiting planes going in that direction, but counting against them when they are coming the other way. Flight times can often be affected, but you'll usually find they are well accounted for in airline timetables, until, that is, a particularly strong jet stream comes along. So again, we're getting this variation in the speeds of the jet streams, so you can't put that down to being due to a consistent spin of the Earth. It's just silly, really. And we have here again, we do of course have this assumption that it's down to the rotation of the Earth, but really the direct cause of the jet stream is due to the difference in temperature. And here it says on this website, weatherstreet.com, what causes the jet stream? A jet stream forms high in the upper troposphere between two air masses of very different temperature. The greater the temperature difference between the air masses, the faster the wind blows in the jet stream. So again, we're getting this difference in the speeds of the jet streams caused by the difference in temperature, which is never consistent. It will change, and if we have this record-breaking wind speed or jet stream speed, then again, it's not really down to the alleged rotation of the Earth. It's just an extreme difference in temperature, not something that's consistent. It says the river of air has wind speeds which often exceed 100 miles per hour and sometimes peak over 200 miles per hour. Jet streams usually form in the winter when there is a greater contrast in temperature between cold continental air masses and warm oceanic air masses. The following image shows an example of this from the National Weather Service's Aviation Computer Forecast model. Okay. Now again, it will go on to talk about eventually this being caused partly due to this idea that we're on a rotating Earth. It says here, even though the wind tries to flow from high pressure to low pressure, the turning of the Earth causes the airflow to turn to the right in the northern hemisphere, so the jet stream flows around the air masses rather than directly from one to the other. But again, this really is kind of an explanation on an assumption that cannot really be measured. What it really comes down to, this difference in speed, is the jet streams. Now, if you look at, for example, Zetetic astronomy, which has the sun doing concentric circles in a kind of vertical corkscrew throughout the year, then this quite easily explains or models the change in seasons. You do not have to have a spinning spherical Earth that's tilted at a certain angle, 23.4 degrees, in order to get this change of seasons. You can model it with Zetetic astronomy that has the sun doing smaller or larger circles throughout the year, as well as gaining height above the Earth in order to create that difference in temperature. So the difference in temperature and the difference in the speeds of the jet streams caused by that difference in temperature is not solely described or explained away with some alleged rotation of a spherical Earth. There are other ways it can be explained as being the cause of the effect, which ultimately resulted in Wolfie flying west to east faster than going east to west, and therefore gave a different or a lighter weight for the mass of 500 grams on those scales when going in a faster lateral or horizontal direction. Now, what's quite funny is when you look at the mental gymnastics and the contradictions that have to take place in order to justify this idea that we are on a spherical Earth, because it's really, you get these simple questions like this one here that's addressed on Forbes: why the Earth's rotation does not affect latitudinal airplane travel. So again, if you come across the flat Earth, you might well have seen people talking about the fact that if the Earth is rotating and we take off from the Earth, then we go against the spin, we should reach the destination a lot quicker than if we're going with the spin, in which case we might never reach the destination. But here's the explanation that is given by someone from NASA. Again, bearing in mind that Wolfie in his video has made the claim that the decrease in weight going west to east is caused by this difference in centrifugal force. But what we have here is an explanation from a NASA flight controller as to why we do not feel a difference of the Earth's rotation. But it is quite funny. Let's have a look. So the answer is given by Robert Frost, an instructor and flight controller at NASA. Does the Earth's rotation have an influence on how long it takes to drive from east to west versus driving the same route from west to east? So a very sarcastic beginning to this answer of a very logical question when it comes to questioning whether there's anything that can prove we live on a globe or not. And he talks about driving on the Earth rather than flying above it, and then poses another question in order to answer that question. Does it take you a different amount of time to walk across your bedroom from east to west than it does walking from west to east? So he's made two comparisons to answer this question by being based on the ground rather than in the air above what should be a moving Earth's surface beneath that person in the air. And then, why would you expect the Earth's rotation to influence the length of a flight for an airplane? An airplane sitting on the runway at the equator is travelling eastwards at 1,000 miles per hour. Just as the ground below it is travelling at that speed. If it wasn't, it would appear to roll backwards at great speed. Once the airplane lifts off of the ground and starts flying, it still has that 1,000 miles per hour, just as the ground does. If you think that the 1,000 miles per hour disappears, what force do you think took it away? Newton's first law of motion tells us that an object in motion continues in motion with the same speed and in the same direction unless acted upon by an unbalanced force. In order for that motion to go away, a force is needed. Now, again, think about the contradictions that are being made here. You don't have to debunk or deny these laws. They're not Newton's laws, they're just Newton's description of what happens to an object if you push it in motion, the inertia of an object, and it will carry on going in at that same speed and in that same direction. But what are we talking about here? We're talking about the idea that we're on a spherical Earth. So this answer here from this NASA person is one of linear conservation of momentum. Whereas, of course, if you're perceiving yourself to be on a spherical rotating Earth, then you would have to talk about, you're talking about angular momentum. not linear momentum. So yes, conservation of a linear momentum is a thing, but what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with an Earth that is supposed to be spinning, so that direction is constantly changing. It is not a constant direction. It's not the same direction. It's angular rotation, angular momentum, not linear momentum. So this again is not a valid argument. It just doesn't work. Okay, and to assume that we are already traveling at a certain speed, and then you take off from the Earth, and so we're assuming that the atmosphere is stuck to the Earth, and there's no difference from being on the ground and being in the air. And he goes on to say this: if there were such a force, would it act upon you if you jumped in the air for a second? If by jumping into the air for a second you could erase the 1,000 miles per hour that you have been by standing still upon the moving ground, you would land about 1,450 feet away from you when you first jumped. That clearly doesn't happen. No, it doesn't happen. So really what we're talking about is just an assumption and justified by an argument that doesn't relate to the physics that would occur on a spinning sphere, whereas what we have in reality is nothing happening that would dictate that we are on a spinning globe. Everything that is done in the world of physics, in the world of navigation, in flying, and all that is based upon being on a stationary Earth with the air flowing above it. Now this is important as well, because we're talking about air that flows at different speeds, at different heights above the Earth. So he's going to go on to say now that we have to also have this idea in our heads that the atmosphere sticks to the Earth and spins with the Earth. Where does it say? It says here, the Earth rotates. The atmosphere around the Earth rotates with the Earth. Everything on the ground, in the water, or in the air also rotates with the Earth at the same speed as the Earth. So if that's the case, how can we have winds of different speeds flowing across the Earth? It doesn't make logical sense, nor is it something that is physically demonstrable or measurable. You're saying on the one hand that the air above the Earth sticks to the Earth, yet we have wind. So it's not sticking to the Earth. Yeah? And then he goes on to say that we can impact the travel time for east-west versus west-east are the prevalent winds caused by Coriolis effect, which in turn arises because of the Earth's rotation. At some latitudes, the prevailing winds are westwards, and at other latitudes, they are eastwards. Okay, so, we just got these answers that really have no basis in our physical, measurable, demonstrable reality. They're just made up scenarios and an almost sarcastic retort for even contemplating this question and demanding measurable proof rather than just some silly explanation to go with the globe model. Yeah. So that being said, let's go back to the claims that Wolfe makes in this video. And so we've covered this Eotvos effect, and we can see that the direct cause of the increase in speed was down to the jet stream. And so this idea that it's anything to do with the claim here made by Wolfe that it is centrifugal force is not a valid claim. It's just his own interpretation, which doesn't fit with what we've seen as being the real cause of jet streams, which is the temperature difference. So this is just an assumption and a choice interpretation based on the belief that you're flying above a spinning spherical Earth. Now, he also claimed in this video that flat Earth researchers refused offers of free flights. I'm one of those flat Earth researchers that Wolfie offered a flight to quite a few years ago, and at the time I didn't accept the offer for a few good reasons. My wife was about to give birth at any time, so it wasn't a good time for me to go gallivanting around just to kind of go and see that Australia exists, or that the stars look different in Australia than they do north of the equator or whatever. So that's why I refused. Plus I had no idea who Wolfie was. He's never shown his face in his videos. I don't know his real name. None of that information has been forthcoming in the years he's been doing these flat earth debunking videos. And so there's no reason for me to just hop on a free flight with someone I don't know just to go and see Australia or do an experiment. Now, he also says that flat earthers don't want to know the truth at all, or that they don't or are afraid to do these experiments. Well, a long time ago, I did my own experiment. Here we can see this was back in 2017, okay, when I had the chance to do it. I used a spirit level app in my phone and flew 10,000 kilometers from Phuket. Here I'm just showing how to calibrate the phone on a slope, and how that the phone will remember the angle or that it was calibrated at. So I flew from Phuket to London, and we can see that here I am in Phuket airport. Okay, I'm calibrating the phone there. I put it on the floor, reset the thing just to show that I've put it on the level. So of course, if we are living on a globe, then and I'm flying from the equator up to the UK, then the phone would be something like that on or near the equator. And then by going up north, we should see a difference in the level of the spirit level. So there I am leveling it on the floor, and I stopped off in okay, you can see here horizontal level recalibrated on the flat floor in Phuket. So calibrated it on the floor in Phuket, so it's level on the floor in Phuket, which if we're on a globe should be like that. And then I got to Dubai, I had another look there, and basically got the same results. It was still level in Dubai compared to Phuket, and eventually arrived at the UK, and we again after measuring this, we got the same horizontal level in London compared to the level calibrated in Phuket. So there was no change in level. Now, of course, the explanation here is that gravity somehow pulls you around and you would not see a difference in level. But this was basically an attempt to see if it was possible to set up this phone and the spirit level app in the phone to record a difference in what would have been different levels or a difference in the direction that the phone would be if it was on the floor in Phuket and on the floor in the UK. So the attempt was made there to see if curvature could be found, and there was no evidence of curvature whatsoever. The level was the same in all the destinations. All we have is an explanation as to why we would not see this difference. So there is no fear in doing these experiments, and there is no ignorance of the results that we would get. There is simply the ability to look at it and assess all the conditions involved. Now, one thing, if you're talking about being scared of doing tests, one very, very simple test I have suggested to people such as Wolfie, who have the resources and the time and the money to do this, is something like this. With a drone or an aircraft, is to fly straight and level. Use the artificial horizon, or do it any way you feel possible. If you're a pilot or a drone pilot, to fly straight, and you wouldn't have to fly very far. You could fly 2 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles, and see if by flying straight there is a difference in the altitude from where you started. Obviously, best to do this across water or earth or land that you know isn't changing in elevation too much. But this would be a very simple test that someone with a drone and a camera could do, or with access to an aircraft could do. Simply fly straight for a few miles and see if you actually gain altitude as the curvature of the Earth drops away from you. Very simple test that any competent, genuine pilot should be able to do. But all we get are excuses and explanations as to why this wouldn't work. And so we have people who would really look for the truth would do this kind of experiment. They would try to see if it's possible to measure any difference in altitude or any signs of curvature. This is what we would see from someone seeking the truth. But from someone who wants to hang on to their belief that we live on a globe, we will have this insistence that experiments like this can't be done, or we'll have excuses and explanations as to the results that we would or wouldn't get. Yeah, so Wolfie, those claims that you made in your video that you verified the Earth's rotation are clearly debunked by this, and the claim that flat earthers are afraid to try certain experiments is debunked, because there's no denying that these results are possible given the real physical phenomenon that we experience when we're flying, and the results that we get, which you actually ignored and know about if you're a pilot, but didn't mention in this video. And also the whole thing about flight plans, because going back to this whole thing again with the coordinate system that we're given to create the globe, it's simply because that is the way we are forced to illustrate or navigate across the Earth. And again, just to remind anyone looking into this that for some reason back in 2016 we were able to see this azimuthal equidistant projection of the air currents going around the Earth. But since flat Earth research has become a thing, we no longer have a way to look at this azimuthal equidistant projection on this particular educational program. So what are we being educated about? Are we being educated to think for ourselves and compare reality and real physical phenomenon with the things that we can or cannot measure or experience on the Earth? Or are we being taught to just imagine some kind of model that has us living on a physically impossible spinning globe? Thank you very much. Click subscribe and the bell icon if you'd like to receive notifications of new videos from Phuket Word.